Morning was Rhys Hawthorne's favourite time of day. It was the beginning, a fresh start, a way to package up the shit that might have happened the day before and shove it way back on a shelf where he wouldn't have to think about it anymore. It was ripe with promise, forward-facing and free from the distractions of yesterday's headache. It was also the best time of day to paint his favourite view of the landscape around Hawthorne House. He often got up early, well before his first morning class, to sit in the bay window of his classroom, in the isolated nook he'd carved out for himself, even though it was in plain view of everyone else, to work with the early morning light. He'd often gotten up early and just sat in the window seat of that nook, fresh tea in hand, chatting with his sister Raina about life, the family, art, and everything else under the sun. The familiar ache of grief that thinking about Raina gave him surprised Rhys, enough to make him lower his paintbrush and clench his jaw. He glanced at the still, imperfect landscape in front of him, then out the window at the beloved view he was trying to render, then at the empty space, where Raina used to sit with him. "You're going to have to get on with your life eventually, Rhys," he heard her teasing, scolding voice in his head. "Just because you haven't gotten it right yet doesn't mean you won't get it right eventually." Rhys's mouth pulled and twitched at those remembered words, like it wanted to smile, even though the rest of him definitely wasn't in a smiling mood. Raina had been talking about his recent breakup, and the deeply vulnerable things he'd confessed to her about the whole ordeal. He'd been dating a woman, Angela, who he'd really liked, but who just didn't have the vibe he was looking for. 6 months before that, he'd sat in the same spot with his sister, complaining about Michael, the guy he'd just broken up with, because as hot as he was in bed, he just didn't have that soft streak that he liked. Raina had always been his go-to sibling, to have those sort of deep, confessional moments with. She'd never judged him for not knowing what he wanted, and she'd encouraged him to sample a little of everything before he decided. Which was ironic, considering she'd married Nick after just a handful of dates. They'd married within 6 months of meeting, had their first kid, Jordan, 7.5 months later, and their second, Macy, a scant year after that. And then she'd been killed in a highway accident when Macy was barely a month old, nearly 14 months ago. Rhys and Nick had been in the car with her. Rhys was in the back seat. Raina had teased him because he was too drunk to drive, and had taken the keys from him. They'd all laughed about how responsible and motherly she was,